My name is Ashley Birkland. I am the Director of Research in the Kent School District. I also co-lead this TUG along with Tashawn Christie, who's the Executive Director of Organizational Effectiveness in the Kent School District. So just wanted to say welcome to everybody. It seems like a long time has passed since we sent out the initial survey and got some feedback for what this would look like. So here we are, and based on the feedback from that survey, we were split kind of 50-50 on having a more informal conversation versus having two presentations with a very specific focus. So we're doing both. We have a little bit of time at the beginning, and Coleman is going to take us through some of the new things that have come out in Tableau recently. So we'll get that update. And then we have some time at the end, about 45 minutes to just have some informal conversation where we'll open it up to everybody here. The meeting's set up so you can unmute and talk when that time comes. And I have some prompts, and if you went back to the agenda, there were some of the topics that came up during the survey. But if anything else has come up, I know every day seems different, and what we were thinking about and was top of mind a month ago might have flown by the wayside, or you figured it out, or it's not important anymore. So it's just great to be here with a community of our peers who we're all doing this work and being able to learn best practices from each other. So Tashawn, anything else to add before we get started?
Well, just one thing. I think that I didn't hear you introduce Jose. Did you? Maybe I missed that. Yeah, so you allow Jose the chance to introduce himself, because I think everyone here, if you don't know him, you should know him going forward. So Jose.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jose Alarcon, everyone. I'm the Tableau account manager. I cover the Pac Northwest, so cover K-12, state and local governments, as well as higher ed in the Pac Northwest. So if you guys have any questions regarding licensing, pricing, if you have any cases, need me to escalate or anything like that, I'm your point of contact. And feel free to reach out with any questions or anything.
And if you have good apartment leads, Jose needs an apartment in Seattle soon.
Yep, looking forward to moving to Seattle and being part of your community.
All right, awesome. I'll go ahead and kick off now. So I'm Coleman Wagoner. I've certainly met many of you in person over the years. I think the very first one started with Tashawn back at Highline a few years ago. And this is certainly an important community to me. I live in Seattle, and I love supporting our Tableau user groups. Today, I'm going to talk about Tableau Innovation. It's certainly one thing that really continues to keep me motivated at Tableau, is we're constantly releasing new features that add value to our customers and really enhancing the way that they work with data, and hopefully being able to do more with data faster. So we're going to talk about some of the new features that have come out in the 2020 series. I know that, just with all the customers that I work with, which many of them, I'm focusing a lot more on higher ed this year. But overall, they're all on different versions of Tableau, and we're on a quarterly release schedule. So oftentimes you as an analyst, you're focused on your dashboards, your reports. You're not always in tune to what's new and what's happening with product innovation at Tableau. So I look forward to running through some of the new features today. Feel free to ask questions. I have the little Zoom chat widget up on my screen, so I'll be able to see things as requests come in for additional conversation, or you feel free to come off mute. I like the free flow of ideas. I certainly want this to be as interactive as possible, as I'm down here in my basement at home in Seattle. So getting started, I like to start every presentation with Tableau's mission. I'm sure you all have seen this slide from me before, but it's really focused on people. Certainly we believe that people are your greatest asset, and putting data into their hands in a meaningful way that allows them to ask and answer questions with data is incredibly powerful. Basically using data to better understand your students and their needs and their progress, such that you can certainly work to make sure and ensure their expected outcome during their education experience. So our mission is to help people see and understand data. It's 7 words that really drive everything we do as a product and as a company. And certainly as we talk about the Tableau platform, it's really robust capabilities across all areas of business intelligence. Certainly data access is important in terms of being able to connect to a variety of different data sources, live and extract. We've made a lot of investments in data preparation. If you're an analyst and you've never tried Tableau Prep Builder, we might have time to give a high-level overview of that today. Next, certainly governance, especially in education, is really important. So being able to understand the different capabilities that enable data governance. We're well known for really our depth of analytics. A lot of our features are more tailored towards the analyst experience, and then certainly our sharing and collaboration platforms. This slide, I think you've probably have all seen as well. Starts with our core products. So Tableau Desktop, once again, as an analyst, where you connect to data and build your visualizations and dashboards. Then you publish to Tableau Server or Tableau Online, which is our secure sharing collaboration platforms. Those are where the end users, the administrators, the principals, the counselors, whoever it might be, securely log in and access the dashboards and reports that are created by oftentimes the small and mighty team of Tableau Desktop analysts. And those were our 2 products for many years. And as we continue to talk to our customers, oftentimes we found the biggest challenge facing analysts is really cleaning and preparing data for analysis. Certainly there's lots of platforms in the space around ETL and data preparation, but it's usually more tailored to an IT-centric skill set. And so Tableau wanted to release a visual and direct way to clean, prepare data for analysis. I'd certainly be interested to know if any of the analysts have used Tableau Prep Builder before. But once again, it's really a solution to prepare data for analysis. And then as we release that platform, the next kind of key feature for our customers was needing that ability to automate the refreshing of data flows from the Tableau Prep Builder in the Tableau server, very similar to scheduling a Tableau extract to refresh. So that Prep Conductor feature came out in the early part of 2019, but it was released as part of what's called the Data Management Add-on. So it is an additional licensing cost, but there's 2 core capabilities that add-on provides. The first was the Prep Conductor for scheduling and automating those flows from Tableau Prep Builder. And next was Tableau Catalog. Tableau Catalog is a feature where essentially it indexes all of the tables and content in your Tableau server, such that you can see how many dashboards and reports tie to which database tables, who owns the data, being able to put in field descriptions and definitions. So make sure that when a user is consuming a dashboard, they have essentially the terminology or the understanding of what the data represents. And so that's part of the Tableau Catalog, which was also released as part of the Data Management Add-on. The last component was Tableau Server Management Add-on. That's really more for, I would say, our more larger customers that have many thousands of people, and you need to have better visibility into the Tableau server health from a concurrency perspective, a hardware utilization, as well as all of the tasks and queries running on the Tableau server. So it's more of an IT admin tool. The next thing I wanted to cover, if you didn't have an opportunity, our Tableau conference-ish just wrapped up a few weeks ago. There was lots of great content from our community of users, and certainly lots of innovation discussions were presented as part of Tableau conference-ish, and all of the content is on demand. So you can go in and watch a variety of different sessions, certainly from our partners, from our Tableau developers and the development team, as well as with Salesforce and other kind of key partners in our community space. The next thing to highlight that I would think most of you are aware of, Tableau was acquired by Salesforce about a year ago. Overall, I think this is a really good thing in terms of our ability to innovate. Certainly Salesforce is a very innovative company. They have lots of great features, and they're just a much larger company, and it's really going to help accelerate innovation backed by the full power of Salesforce. So our development teams have already started working on integrations between Tableau and Salesforce. Certainly, I'm not sure how deep the Salesforce community is within the K-12 space, but certainly there's lots of great combined features that we will see between Tableau and Salesforce in the future. Okay, so diving into the innovation, and I know I believe I spoke at the last user group meeting on some of these features, but I figured we'd highlight some and then dive into and focus on the ones from 2021, 2022, and 2023. But once again, 2019.3, the Tableau catalog, encryption at rest of Tableau extracts in a native way, PDF attachment for subscriptions was another great feature when you want to schedule a Tableau report to run and sent to somebody's inbox, but doing it as a PDF attachment. So you have basically a historical snapshot record in a PDF. We've made up a lot of improvements around the Tableau server UI and relating to accessibility, which is certainly important in higher ed and the education space and state and local government. We also made improvements to how Tableau works with tables. So if you haven't experimented with that, essentially allows you to bring and drag and drop more dimensions onto the visualization, create essentially a text table of information. It also improved our sorting capabilities. So I know that was a big impact for our customers, that maybe they want to get to a student list of students, but they want to have lots of dimensions and a horizontal scroll bar that allows them to really get to that table of data in a visual way. Next, in 2021 and 2022, we're going to talk about things like viz animation, dynamic parameters, relationships, and metrics, and some of the features in 2020.3. So first, viz animations, it's turned on by the format menu of Tableau. If you have Tableau 2020.1 installed in terms of your desktop, as well as the Tableau server. Essentially what it does is not only does it just add flash to your visualizations, essentially it helps with how your brain interprets information as data moves. So as you sort and as you filter, you'll be able to see how the data is visually changing very quickly and easily. Next, dynamic parameters. This was our #1 requested features on our ideas forum for probably at least 5 years that I'm aware of. And we finally released an ability to natively do it in Tableau. The idea behind a parameter essentially allows for a user to input a single value into a dropdown or whatever it might be. But if you load a list of dimension values into a parameter, for example, I want to load a list of schools because I want to be able to select a school and compare it with the average for the district, right? One use case of a parameter is those types of comparisons. If, as you work through the data, if you had a new school come online, it oftentimes would require your analyst to download the workbook and manually add a value into or reload the list of values. So what you'll see here is just that ability to not only load new dimension members into a parameter, but also has the ability to set a default value. So for example, if you're looking at, you have a parameter because you're comparing behavioral incidents for this month compared to the same month 1 year ago, which is a common type of comparison you might do with parameter. But once you publish your workbook, that's basically a static parameter value. But now in the newer versions of Tableau in 2020.1, you can use, for example, a level of detail expression to say, what's our maximum date that I have in the data? And I want that to be the default value. Next, this feature probably isn't as interesting to K-12 in the sense that most often you're working with a small group of Tableau desktop analysts. But for our larger customers, login-based license management is designed to make key management of Tableau creators much easier. So rather than having someone activate a Tableau desktop or Tableau prep builder with a 16 or 20 character product key that they need to remember and have available to them. Essentially what it allows is that a user, when they activate their Tableau, they just need to, if they're a creator on the Tableau server, they can activate using their server credentials. So it really helps with the IT side of managing license keys. Next, in 2020.1, we released features for permission improvements. So couple key areas there. One of them is around what's called nested projects. Think of it as subfolders in the Tableau server structure. And there used to be limits on how you could set permissions to the child folders or projects within a higher level project. If you locked it up at the parent level, then all of the child level project folders or subfolders were locked as well. So now you have a lot more flexibility in terms of how various project structures are nested and what locks and unlocks those projects. We also improve search capability. So if you're searching for certain groups in the Tableau server or users to set permissions on them, and also a copy and paste function. So if you have a standard common way of setting custom permissions, you can now copy and paste between projects in that way. All right, so let's dive now into 2020.2. The newest feature that I think is most important with 2020.2 is this concept of relationships. If you had seen Tableau Conference 2019, you probably saw this feature as part of developers on stage. Essentially what it is, it's a new way of combining tables for analysis in Tableau. So rather than focusing on how you want to join your tables up front, it essentially allows you to create relationships between tables. And to illustrate this, in previous versions of Tableau, when you joined your student table with your behavioral incidents table, you're defining the join up front, and essentially it created a third table, and then all aggregation happened on that third table. But what relationships do is essentially allows you to combine and analyze simultaneously, creating essentially a more flexible data model, being able to handle specific analysis on the fly, in the sense that in some cases on your analysis, it might make sense to use an inner join. Other times you might need to use a left join. And what this does is essentially allows you to leverage all various types of joins in one relationship. It also is level of detail aware. So in that sense, if you have essentially multiple fact tables that you want to bring together, you can relate them on a dimension. And the benefit of that is it's not going to explode out your underlying records by doing various forms of one-to-many or many-to-many types of joins. It also creates more context-aware queries. What that means from the analyst perspective is improvements potentially to performance, in the sense that oftentimes your data model joins 8 or 10 different tables. And what relationships does is, based off of what you drag and drop for your visualization, if it doesn't need to join all 8 tables, it won't need to. It'll just on the fly interpret the query that needs to be run to bring back the results without having to upfront join 8 different tables. The next kind of key area of interest is around mapping, and this has been new features really since the beginning of 2019, but it just continues to get better. And the first was different mapping functions like make point, make line, distance, and buffer. And then in 2020.2, I think this was really important to a lot of our state local government agencies that are using essentially Esri ArcGIS for their various mapping feature sets. So being able to bring those in as essentially a spatial file connector that can essentially automate the refreshing of the spatial layers in Tableau. Next is 2020.3. We have the capability to union spatial files. And then more importantly, in the future, there's going to be new capabilities around what are called map layers. Essentially what that means is you can layer multiple spatial objects onto a map. So for example, you might have school district boundaries in one map layer. You might have your individual schools as a spatial object as well. And then you might have, other learning centers as another separate layer. And just being able to plot those all on the same map is going to be much more intuitive in the future. The next feature I think is really interesting is the concept of 2020.2 is called metrics. So what oftentimes happens, especially with executives, is your analyst team builds dashboards, many different dashboards. Each dashboard focuses on a certain subject area or various key performance indicators. But oftentimes for an executive, they just simply want to know what the current value is at that point in time. And so rather than having to navigate to each individual dashboard, I can capture what's called a metric. It's a standard content type to basically have a refreshed value. It's very similar to if you monitor stock prices on a phone in terms of a phone app. Usually it tells you what the current stock ticker price is and a quick spark line of that information. And so basically you create metrics from many different dashboards, put them into a project folder as its own essentially object. And that way, especially for mobile on the go, it's great to be able to quickly and easily see what's the current value for attendance rate for this day across all of our schools in our district, or what's our total enrollment look like during enrollment periods. Next, in 2020.2, many of our customers are starting to do a lot more with predictive analytics using things like Python and R for more statistical libraries and bringing those into Tableau. And those are called analytics extensions. And the challenge there with Tableau Server in the past is that your Tableau Server really could only be configured for either communicating with an RServe instance or a TabPy Python server. And so what this does is basically per site on a Tableau server, you can configure it to leverage its own external analytics extension server. So one site could be a TabPy site, one could be a RServe site for our customers that are getting into more of the advanced statistical analysis leveraging R and Python code. All right, now we just recently released Tableau 2020.3. I would say biggest feature that came to that release was actually a Tableau Prep Builder feature. It's one that, really, I would say was a barrier to the adoption of Tableau Prep, in the sense that if I'm an analyst who's going to clean and prepare data for analysis and go through the effort of doing that types of data transformation, bringing data from multiple sources and cleaning and preparing it for analysis, oftentimes the output needed to be more than just a Tableau extract, because obviously Tableau oftentimes is one tool amongst many tools that might be used in a organization. So in 2020.3, we released the capability where a Tableau Prep Builder, the analyst that creates that flow of data, now has the ability to write the output of that Tableau Prep Builder flow into a few select numbers of relational databases like SQL Server, Oracle, etc. So once again, I think it's really going to help with the growth and adoption of Tableau Prep Builder, being able to map that data back into a database as a table that then can be used by many applications. Next, from an analyst perspective, is features called search improvements. So as our customers connect to many tables of data, and there might be hundreds of fields being used for analysis, certainly the search box was always useful to find the field that you were looking for, but now you can essentially filter in the data pane based off of things like a calculation or a comment. And so adding those prefixes, it basically is going to subset the data pane to just calculations that you created. So it really helps with the kind of user experience of an analyst working with many fields for analysis. Next new useful function is the in operator. So this is basically says that we're looking at a calculation and testing whether that value exists within a specified comma separated value list. And so in this case, this is an example of a calculation that does essentially a group in Tableau. But instead of having to write, if subcategory equals A or subcategory equals B or subcategory equals C, you can save a lot of space by saying if subcategory is in this list of comma separated values, then do something else, return another field, for example. This is going to be great. It also combines well with sets. So sets are a great way to do this type of, if it's in this set, then do something else, do another, right? You're just using logic and calculations, but using sets is also a preferred method because sets can be very dynamic. Also in 2020.3, in terms of new functions, there's new predictive functions. I will tell you that I don't have much of a statistics background beyond a few classes in college and high school. But the idea is there's two new table calculations that the first one, you can see the definition here, but essentially it returns a target value at a specified percentile based off of predictors that you add into the calculated field. So the idea with the top one is give me a value for total sales at the 50th percentile based off of the total quantity that we sold in a month or a quarter or whatever it might be, and see if it's if at the 50th percentile it's higher or lower than the actual value. Next, the model percentile is also known as a posterior predictive distribution function. And what that does is basically says whether the probability of an unobserved value is less than or equal to the observed mark. So based off of the total quantity in the region, what's the probability that a future value is going to be less than or equal to the current value that we have experienced. Next is features. We've done a lot of features that relate to improving license management. And one of them is called grant license on sign-in. So oftentimes when I talk to some of my customers, maybe they purchased 100 viewers on a Tableau server because they had an idea of the 100 people that are going to use Tableau to consume analytics. But sometimes what we find is that of the 100, sometimes only 60 people have actually logged in and accessed the content that was created. So rather than upfront assigning 40 licenses that essentially go unused, it can remain in essentially your reserved pool of available licenses until somebody actually logs in to consume that license. So it makes a lot of license management much easier. Next, subscription run on refresh. I think this is a really useful feature, especially it is tied to a single Tableau extract refresh. But if I have a dashboard and I schedule my extract refresh to run at 5 a.m., rather than having to guess what time I want to set my subscription for and hoping that my extract had run by the time of my subscription, now you can just set it to say that when my data refreshes in my extract, I want to then have Tableau generate my PDF or my subscription and send it to the inbox when the data has been updated. It's a really useful feature, something that has been oftentimes been requested by our community. All right, so I'll go ahead and pause there. I have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to quickly look through the chat and then I'll go through a few of the features as well. I'm just going to scroll through the chat really quick and see if there's any questions. So there's some interest in the new mapping capabilities, specifically around potentially additional map layers. I think that's definitely going to be better in the future. For example, yes, adding bus routes as well as schools and other geographic fields and just layering them on the same map is going to be much easier. All right, so not a lot of questions so far. So let me go ahead and turn on Tableau Desktop. I'm trying to remember if I showed this in a previous user group or not. It's one, a lot of these features started around version 2019. Essentially what this is you can imagine this data set is parks and monuments in New York City. It was just something from their open data. But the first key was being able to map geographic coordinates based off of X and Y and a spatial reference identifier. So that's using the make point function, which I indicated was new. There's also the idea of a parameter action. So the idea that I can select a point, and when I make a selection, you'll notice how the parameter values update based off of a user selection. So parameter actions came out in 2019. And then seeing that I also have calculations for calculating essentially the distance around my selected point, as well as drawing a buffer circle around my selected point. So different ways of doing more advanced mapping capabilities in Tableau with make point, make line, distance, and buffer functions. Next, I can't remember if I went through explain data, but the idea behind it is I'm an analyst and I'm looking at a visualization I dragged and dropped, and I see something that appears to indicate that this data might be an outlier. What I can do is if I click on that, I can see that there'll be a little option for explain data. And what that does essentially, it starts taking and importing the data and running through various statistical tests to determine, for example, what might be causing the various statistical outliers. So for example, what did I do? No RTTI data, not seen that before. But the idea, if I look at the average cost to repair, that dark blue, and it runs through this, what it will see is that, for example, it's saying that this is airplane data looking at the number of times an aircraft was hit by a bird or another type of wildlife. Interesting data set. But what you can see is that it says that, looking at the distribution of records for a US Airways, that most of the aircraft types are B737s. And that itself may not be a real indicator of why there's higher average cost repair. It could be the case that that type of airplane is more costly to repair, but it also will call out things like extreme values. And so looking at this, what you'll see is that there was one record about US Airways that if you look at the actual description, it looks at the bird strikes that land in the Hudson River, and they made a big movie about it. So it's a way to, as you explore data, it's being able to come up with ideas of why the certain values are what they are, what dimensions most contribute to the values that you're seeing. Table support, I think we've talked about this one. Essentially allows for those wider tables with lots of dimensions, so it can go up to 50 columns. It added the horizontal scroll bar, and it also gives you that flexibility to say, well, I want to sort this based off of airport ID. And in previous versions of Tableau, it would essentially sort the airport ID within this one row, so it didn't essentially do anything. But now you can see that it actually sorts the way users are going to expect in a table layout and reorient the rows accordingly. Viz animations, once again, that's turned on in 2020.1. If you go to the format menu and animations, you can set whether what your workbook default is and whether you turn it on for specific sheets. But the idea is if I select central, you're going to see how the bars change and move based off of the user selections. You can see which ones are increasing in order or decreasing in order based off of the animation. Next was dynamic parameters, and I won't go through this completely, but the idea is when I open my Tableau workbook or when I refresh the query in my workbook, I want to reload from that data set the list of values for month or for school or for whichever dimension I choose to load into this parameter. And so that way, as I get new data, it's going to reload with the new month values. It also has this option for when the value, when my workbook opens, I want to, in this case, use a level of detail expression to calculate the maximum date that I have in my data set. And I want to then reload the list of parameters based off of that max date. So it's great when you have new data and you don't want to have to download the workbook off of the server, make an update and republish it. So that's what a dynamic parameter does. The pages shelf, you probably have seen this in Tableau in previous versions where when you click it, essentially it animates over time how your data is changing based off of the field in the pages shelf. This now actually works in the Tableau server to page dynamically in a way that actually makes sense. So that's a new feature as well. The in operator is really useful. Once again, it's going back to that calculation I showed in the previous example in the PowerPoint, but essentially it says if the subcategory is in a list of dimension members, then whatever your calculation logic is. I didn't talk about set controls, but sets are really useful as well. So for example, if I look at, I don't know, I'll just do something simple. I'll look at states, and let me do a filled state, and then I will create a set based off of set values. So this is my state set. And then I can add my state set to color, for example, or add it in a calculation. The thing that is new is the ability to show the set control. So the set control looks like a quick filter, but because it's changing the values in a set, you can do many more dynamic things with it. So for example, rather than filtering based off of my user selection, I'm essentially, in this case, coloring based off of my user selection. So saving the set of values of schools, looking at some comparison of the selected schools compared to all other schools in our district. A set control is really useful to do that. All right, I'm gonna go into relationships really quickly, and we'll look at this data looks at books, and you can see here there's a number of different tables for analysis in this case, and they're all at different levels of granularity. So the first case is we have information about books. Certainly books have authors, and so we relate, when you drag and drop a table, you're seeing how, essentially what's called the noodle. And so the noodle essentially creates that relationship between a book and author based off of your common identifiers. So it feels like it would be a join, but instead of saying I want this as a left join or an inner join or a right join, the relationship basically is going to dynamically do and handle what the join is based off of what you drag and drop from your various tables. So I'll remove that. But the benefit is I have books. Books relate to authors, and books have awards, books have ratings, but ratings for each book, there might be many ratings. And for each edition, there might be many sales. So trying to bring those things together, generally that caused the need to blend many different data connections together because you have different levels of granularity between tables. What this is doing is essentially treating each table as an independent object and then relating them together based off of the relationships you define. One thing that is important is that if you double click on any one of these tables, essentially this is where you'll start to see, getting back to the old behavior if you want to, right? So if I wanted to drag and drop addition here, right, this is where I can go back to the standard join functionality if I needed to. But once again, rather than go back to, where did I go? I lost my relationship. Bookshop, David, drag tables here. I'll see if I can just go back to it. Try again, edit data source. Oh, I lost it all. Let me go, I'll go back a little bit further. At some point, it'll get me back to where I want to be, hopefully. Does that make sense? Essentially, as you drag and drop tables, it's relating different tables as objects. I'm not defining the join up front. And the thing that is new and different, I would say for the analysts, once they set up relationships, is each table object is handled independently. So you'll see that instead of your data being dimensions at the top, measures at the bottom, essentially your dimensions and your measures are within the table structure or object that you released.
So Coleman, this is David from Renton. This new relationship's always kind of confused me. So I'd actually like to see you build a little bit again, the relationships, particularly how you got to the secondary relationship through additions and sales.
Sure. Yeah, so let me go edit data source and hopefully I'm back to what it looks like. And let me, I don't think I have that data source, but let me just go ahead and I'll remove everything. Okay, so first, when I think about which table I want to use at the outset, usually I'm trying to think of what's my most granular detail table. In this case, a lot of times it's more of a dimension table, for example, about students, in this case, about books. Essentially, think of it as you're kind of hanging objects to a table, all right? I want to add in sales to and relate it on books. I want to add in ratings and relate it on book. And so as I drag and drop, for example, ratings, by default, it creates the noodle effect, the setup of the relationship. Now you could define it based off of multiple, basically multiple clauses of, maybe it's book ID and reviewer ID, if that was the relationship between, the ratings table that had both a book ID and a ratings ID or reviewer ID. So that's the default behavior is always going to be a relationship. If I instead look at book, I can double click on book. And then this is essentially relating physical tables, whereas in previous, it's looking at more of a logical table structure. And so now if I wanted to drag and drop ratings after I've double clicked on it, then it's going to provide me the option to do my left, right, or inner join between them. So that's the difference between the two. And so if I have books, I might double click on book and say that book is made up of one table. I want to bring in another table and join it between, I'm trying to remember what I have in these. I guess I have book ID. You could do a calculation between book ID 1 and book ID 2, right? So I'm still able to join it in the way that I've done in previous. And that essentially creates the logical table, right? So this is a logical table that represents two physical tables that are actually joined. And then I can bring in ratings, which is a relationship to this new logical object. And now I'm saying that ratings relate to books based off of a book identifier. But each one of these, instead of seeing down here as one large table of many fields, right? Remember that idea of I join table A and table B, I essentially create table C down below. This is treating each one independently as its own separate table, which then allows me to bring in additional information. For example, books have authors, so I can relate it on author. Does that make sense of the difference between double clicking and doing a physical join between tables?
Yeah. This is very good explanation, particularly about table C.
Which then relates back to the other one. One thing to cover that I really like, and I could send a link probably in the chat or in follow up, and I probably can find it on the internet. So she's a product manager at Tableau, but has one of the most brilliant kind of analytical minds, and she created the 8 R's of relationships. So she came up with this kind of concept of 8 R's of Tableau relationships. And there's a blog post on it. So Bethany Lyons, she's awesome. And it's basically saying, based on relationship, these are the various rules. And there's also a workbook that kind of illustrates how each of these each of these R's in the relationships work. So definitely highly recommend taking a look at that. I didn't have time to go through the full 8 R's of relationships. That would be like its own 45-minute conversation. But once you start setting up these relationships as you see fit, right? I have additions. Additions have sales. Sales have, a logical or a physical relationship between the different objects there. But lastly, once you connect to the table, each table is treated independently with its own set of dimensions and measures. So in previous versions of Tableau, you'd probably remember there's a thing called number of records as an auto-generated field. Now it's basically, based on the table, what is the count of the individual rows in that table? And I can look at, for example, for additions, I can look at number of pages based off of my book that I have, book ID. Right, so I drag and drop there. maybe I look at that like that, but then I want to look at average ratings, being able to bring that. So rather than creating this up as a separate, what was I going to say, as a blended table, blended relationship, I'm able to relate the tables and then just drag and drop in Tableau, and Tableau just on the fly is going to determine where there's matches between the tables and bring those two things together. So you can see that, for example, in the data set that has books, I have books that have essentially, there are ratings that don't have a matching book identifier. So I can see that there's a null there, whereas there might be cases. So it basically determines what's a left or a right or an inner join. If it was just an inner join, we would have lost the perspective of any ratings that have books that don't relate to the book table, for example, if you're looking at multiple disparate data sources trying to bring them together. Does that make sense and kind of answer the question there?
Yeah, thanks very much. And so the book table that you created that you see in this is the two tables together, right? So it's just duplicating what you created in the relationship, but showing you it as one table on the left side there.
Yeah, so the table on the left side is, yeah, the data model essentially, but the benefit there is rather than having to create independent Tableau data connections and then worry about blending and matching dimensions and those types of things, and what's your primary data source and your secondary source, it really solves a lot of those things on the fly. And based off of what you drag and drop, Tableau is just going to generate the query that's needed for analysis, so we can make sure that we're getting the right levels of granularity without some form of a duplication effect. I think way back when, I think it was Tashawn said, well, one of the challenges I had was, I have, student behavioral incidents, but not every student has a behavioral incident, but I want to understand, what percentage of my students, or based on a demographic, have behavioral incidences. So you had this idea of, I need a distinct count of students by demographic, but I also need to get a distinct count of behavioral incidences or students with behavioral incidences. And that was always a challenge when you're trying to blend, because there was limitations on being able to use a distinct count as a aggregation between multiple data sources. So this makes it much easier to relate on different things and be able to do that type of analysis without going through the limitations of blending or the duplication of data sources.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Nick Teal from Renton. I just wanted to add about the relationships. Like a great way to put it in perspective, that use case that I've been able to use it is when you join like student, like demographic data with attendance data, because you might have a million columns in your demographic table, but it's like only one row per kid. But then for the attendance table, you have like a ton of data, because it might be like one row per kid per day. That's exactly right, David. But so with your attendance data, you might have one set that has like many rows per kid, and then the other one. Did I actually just say Nick Teal from Renton, or did I say Kent?
You said Renton. We were wondering if you were telling us something.
Funny. Well, that's because I was gonna talk. I was responding to David. I live in Renton. I lived in Renton originally, so that's why I'm from Renton.
Not in Renton anymore.
Yeah. Basically, like, no, I was gonna say the relationships have been really, really powerful, and it lets the size of the data source really, really small, and like Tableau runs so much faster. Because Brian could probably speak to this, like, when you have the data set that's a million rows long and you're joining all these things together, it gets massive. Whatever. I'm just trying to be helpful to Sean.
Yeah, I can definitely confirm that as well, though, Nick. You're right that it does run a lot faster, because you can, at least in certain areas, you can eliminate a lot of those just duplicate rows that get built when you have 15 joins. So it does help a lot.
Yeah, I was able to, because like in the past, the way that I would build things, like you're just joining a bunch of things together. And if like the SBA data set has, 4 rows per student or whatever, and the iReady data set has like 6 rows per kid, and then like you just keep on joining, and then it just gets like all these duplicate everythings, and it's awful. But then if you have the relationships, you have like the one base at the 1 row per kid, and then you relationship each of the like the many to one for each of these things. And it's really, really powerful, and it makes things be a lot smoother. I've used that in a lot of the new, because we have so many different data sources for some of our current projects that we're working on. It's been really helpful to like quickly throw together data sets and not have to worry about duplicate everything.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this data set is not student related, but yeah, it's this idea that, you know, book ID, if I actually join 2 editions, because books have multiple editions, then you're creating more rows for each book, for each edition that the book has, but then your pages measure from the book now is, you know, X number of times the size because of each edition, and so your total is never getting the actual correct total anymore. So that context idea of level of detail aware is something that's really useful. And then when you actually click in on one of these and click on, for example, view data, you'll see that it's essentially treating it as independent, right? So edition is its own independent table here, for example. So lots of just different ways to look at, you know, how this works. It does take some getting used to in terms of, you know, the noodle effect and how it relates, but the idea is it's designed to reduce the complexity of the query without having to join a bunch of tables up front before you drag and drop, less times using level of detail expressions to get back to, you know, a certain level of aggregation that dealt with a many-to-many type of join. So there's lots of great benefits relationships. I would assume that there, once again, the 8 R's of relationships is a great blog post to kind of illustrate it further. And then I'm sure if you YouTube it, you'll find various videos from Tableau Conference and otherwise that will have information about relationships. I had a question around pros and cons of use cases for Tableau Prep with this new connector feature. Yeah, so unfortunately at this point, Tableau Prep is actually still creating a physical output table. So if I'm relating table A and table B, my output is table C in the Tableau Prep world. So I think there's a lot of cases where relationships are a little more flexible. So it may be a case where you use Tableau Prep to prepare data for analysis for essentially creating a table A, right? Doing cleaning and transformations of table A, but keeping it at a certain level of granularity, outputting that as an extract, and then relating tables back to that output from Tableau Prep, right? So there's differences there between whether in Tableau Prep, you're going to do essentially row level joins to create one output versus maybe you do Tableau Prep to prepare your different tables, but then once you have those different extracts, then you use those extracts in relationships of the prepared data such that you're able to leverage the power and benefit of the relationships data model. And I'm sure over time, the Tableau Prep builder will be able to kind of output a packaged data flow data model that respects relationships. But at this point, it's very much still your row level join output of table A and table B equals table C at this point. Not sure how many people have seen Tableau Prep, so I'll take 1 minute there. I know we're going to move into more open Q&A, but once again, I think Tableau Prep is a great feature that we've really added value over the last 3 years. It's pretty much on a monthly cadence of adding new features into Tableau Prep. It's really great for analysts that are trying to clean prepare data from multiple sources, different backends, just otherwise cleaning up the sometimes the challenge with different tables in the database. So I'll just open it up and just kind of show a quick overview for the people that may not have seen Tableau Prep Builder before. And then once again, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put them in the chat. Okay, So once again, Tableau Prep Builder, it starts with connecting to data, very similar to Tableau Desktop. I'm just going to open up this standard flow here. But once again, you connect to a database, you have various tables, which are essentially your input steps. The important thing about input steps is Tableau does some sampling to make this much faster. So just be aware that it may sample data. So you may not see every little, mistake or, anomaly in the data when you sample, but you do have the flexibility if you choose to use all the data. Then you have a number of different transformation steps. The most common one is the cleaning step. I love the cleaning step. Essentially, what that does, the visually profiling of the data. So once again, this is back to kind of the Superstore data set, and I know all of you probably do not like it, but the idea is it shows me the distributions of records for, in this case, Florida. And when I click on Florida, then it's going to proportionally show me of the records in Florida. And it looks like most of the records have 20% discounts on items. And for some reason, there's one record in the data set that is 17, right? No store is going to give you 17 times your money to purchase an item. So we can either, we see that one record selected. I could go ahead and say, well, I want to exclude that, right? If it's some test record that wasn't supposed to be in there, I could exclude it. I could edit the value as well. So nothing's written back at this point to my SQL database. It's just in the output at the end of the line, these output data sources, it's going to have that data cleanup in it. So you can see here, I've unioned 4 different data sets together, and then I joined to another third table. So this is doing that row level join. But the things that I do like about the joins in Tableau Prep, when you are actually doing joins, is it does tell you how many are included and excluded in the join in terms of records that match and do not match between different tables. So that's really useful as well. And then maybe you pre-aggregate the table, because instead of having one row for each student, I want to aggregate it up to the total number of students at that school, right? So I can do a pre-aggregation. And then at the end of the line, I have an output, which is generally a Tableau extract file or a CSV or a published data source on the Tableau server. And then lastly, the new feature in 2020.3 is this idea that this output that I created, I want to put back into SQL Server, Oracle, or some other table as a new table object in the database. And so that's what that is. And as an analyst in Tableau Prep Builder, certainly I click run the flow, and it's going to rerun through the various changes and steps that I made, and then output that data source. But then the data management add-on is where you automate the refreshing and the cadence of scheduling these transformation steps on a regular basis. And with that, I know I'm at 2:30, so I will stop and open up for any questions or just any flows of ideas.
This is Alex in Auburn, and one of the few people here that doesn't have, data something in their job title. So I apologize if my question is a little more layman. So I've been using Prep for a while, and I really like the certainty it gives me. I can look at all of my data sources and exactly how they're combined, and I can verify whether they're combined correctly or if there's duplication or things like that happening. And so I've really become reliant on that. I love that I can be confident in the output. And when I look at the relationships feature in desktop, it still kind of baffles me, like what's going on under the hood. I don't really see what's happening or see what kind of join is happening. I feel like I'm kind of being told, just put all your data sources in there, throw the dimension on the view, and cross your fingers and hope it works out. And just somehow magically there's not going to be duplication of data. It's just going to work. I don't know. Is there a way to verify, like going back to your example that you did with the relationships, exactly what kind of join did happen here? To be more confidence that it's going to work properly?
Yeah. I think that's going to tie back to the different R's in relationship, because you're right. If I drag out a dimension and then drag a measure from that one table, right, it's obviously going to send one query and it's only on that one table. But then when you drag a measure from the other table, from another measure from a different table, right, then it's essentially going to blend it together, right? But it's, not really, there's no way to just see the underlying query to say, did it join or did it blend or did it something else? But I think the blog post for the 8 R's of relationships kind of help with understanding, the idea of what relationships are doing. But yeah, unfortunately, there's not an easy way beyond, clicking the data here and then viewing the underlying data and seeing, which table it came from, right? Average ratings, click on ratings, and it's going to show for that book identifier, these are the records, but it doesn't necessarily show, that this was a join or not, right? It's treating this independently of the, other table. I know that doesn't really answer your question in terms of like the confidence you have in, is this bringing back the right measure that I expect in terms of duplication? But usually I look at the underlying data to make sure that it's pulling the right information that I expect.
Yeah, I just often find myself getting data results that are accurate seeming, and then I go back to my prep and then I realize, oh, there's where I went wrong. That was actually supposed to be a different kind of join, and I can fix it. And with this relationship, I feel like I might miss those more often.
Yeah,
so Alex, I was having the same issue because I didn't really understand that well. But what Coleman just described, and I'm just saying because it was a revelation just in this whatever hour, is I'm starting to think of it as layers. All right, so it's what Tableau is able to do is find out from the layers of data that you have, because basically each table is a different layer, almost like three-way chess or different puzzles you're laying on top of each other. But if there's a piece that matches for each one, then it's going to grab all the rest of the puzzle with it, or the pieces with it, those layers with it. You just have to make sure you've defined that book ID, or in maybe your case, IEP manager, if you're using Skyward from the from a certain table, is related to case manager in another table. Making sure that those are there. But what I'm finding is like, why am I using prep for some of these joins now? Because like now I better understand how the relationships is working.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of add on to what David said there. In my experience, the more I used prep, the more comfortable I was doing all of the data work in Tableau desktop, because at least for our district, the prep conductor is prohibitively expensive. And so just by using the same sort of processes in prep over and over again, I got really used to like, oh, if I want it to look like this, what I need to add is this, and then piece it all together. As far as the relationships go, I think the way that I thought about it is still back from that first Tableau conference when they mentioned it, when they talked about the idea of calculating average number. I forget what the count was, but it was like people involved in some process broken up by state, and then ended up with like 400 billion people in California because making all those duplicate rows. I just sort of think about it in terms of that. I'm like, okay, so whenever I'm using relationships, basically what I'm doing is just looking at two tables and not duplicating the rows in the way that a normal join would have done.
Got it.
Does that help at all?
I think so. And it sounds like I should really read this blog post that's been referenced.
Well, the other thing I heard you saying, Alex, is will I be missing something? I always worry about that too, but in essence, it's Tableau, whether it's prep or the relationships now, it's what you put in there. And for me, I'm still going to use prep to find out, as Coleman demonstrated, some of those weird outlier variables, because I think prep does that pretty well.
Cool.
Another tip is sometimes I will, I have like a mini dashboard that just does the quick data checks after I run a Tableau prep flow. And sometimes if I have something really complicated, I'll actually do like 2 or 3 outputs so that I can figure out where it went wrong if it's not what I expect, and kind of do data checks along the way. But does that make sense?
I think so. Thank you.
And Sarah, we might want you to demonstrate that at one of our next meetings, just so people can kind of visualize, because I think I get what you're saying. because we use Tableau a lot as data validation rather than just making displays. So I think that's the process you're describing, but it might be good just to show people because then they can adopt that as part of their process as well.
Sure.
I know,
Yep.
putting you on the spot, huh?
Well, I have a data flow that merges our Swiss data with our SIS data, and like I'll do an output that just has the Swiss data to make sure I did that part right, and then I'll do an output that has, you know, both of them together, and you know, like I'll just kind of do it that way and then run some quick checks to make sure it makes sense.
Yep.
I would love to see Sarah present. So that's, I second that.
I know. Just roped you into it. So
I love that David is volunteering someone other than me to present for once.
I know. I noticed that too. So Sarah, you're on the list for next time. So just know that.
Coleman, quick question.
Yep.
We haven't updated past, I think, 2020.1. I could be wrong about that. Or 2020.2. When relationships were first introduced, they were, and I don't know, I'm checking if this is still the case. It didn't allow any calculations.
Mm-hmm.
So like in a join, in a join, if I'm, you know, for example, I join on entry date and date in the school year, and I say, you know, if no, then return end of the school year, so I get all the dates. But when I was trying to use relationships for a similar thing, the calculations weren't available. Is that something that is either available now or at least being discussed as something down the pike?
Yeah, so I believe it's 2020.3. We released the ability to use the calculations for relationships. So, you know, if I have a string, some string that I need to concatenate to relate it back to a different table, I can now do that in 2020.3. And there also is the variation in the operators, so inequality operators and things like that. So I do think that we're definitely moving in that right direction. And in 2020.3, we released some of those capabilities to add a more flexibility to how the relationship is defined and established.
Cool, because that actually has been a bit of a hiccup for us, or at least for me.
Yeah. One thing I did want to cover is the Tableau conference 2020-ish. If you go to, let's see which one, I'll send you the link to it, but essentially you sign in very much like you sign in with your Tableau account for being part of the user group. I think it uses the same login. If you search for relationships, there's a webinar video on demand about the 8 R's of relationships, as well as another one on understanding relationships. So there's a couple good ones that I think would be useful to watch as you're kind of going through and working with relationships as Tableau conference oriented videos. Hopefully people have the opportunity to see some sessions live, and there's lots of content available from Zen masters and other great people in the Tableau community sharing different videos on different topics.
Colin, I just want to give you a compliment from your presentation. Thank you very much for using lots of education examples. It helps us bring it to mind. Yeah, it helps us bring it to mind. For folks who won't see as many education things in the Tableau conference, but don't let that scare you, particularly like if you get analysis of Viz, for example. I found some really interesting things in the retail and sales analysis of Viz folks, particularly if you like Starbucks. You can see how Starbucks uses it. But that kind of being able to open your mind a little bit to saying, oh yeah, so students are like coffee cups to them, or whatever it might be. You might want to make an analogy. You can see a lot of useful tricks in making interesting business.
Yeah, and I will say from Tableau's perspective, there's certainly going to be changes coming as we're now part of Salesforce, and Salesforce, you know, kind of operates a little differently and kind of treats higher ed and education as its own separate vertical. So there's a lot more content. Generally at Tableau conference in previous years, you know, there might be, you know, higher ed meetups or education meetups, but there wasn't, you know, tailored content just for, you know, a track for just for education. And I think we're working towards, you know, various kind of higher ed summits and different kind of virtual conferences conferences, as well as I'm sure at some point in the future having in-person conferences that are Tableau for education specific, everything tailored to education, as smaller conferences rather than just one big conference a year that's every customer from all industries. I think you can learn a lot from these presentations that are related to all various types of industries, but being able to also have the education oriented topics and discussions are things that I think Tableau will continue to do a lot more in the future for our education vertical specifically. Just looking through the chat and see if I missed any questions, but I think we're doing pretty well. Ashley, was there other topics you want to introduce, or we're just going to go to open forum?
Tishawn's going to take the lead on that piece. Thanks, Coleman.
Cool. I will stop sharing.
So thank you very much, Coleman. As always, you do a really good job of representing us and being able to connect with where we are with trying to do some data. I know that there were a couple of things a couple of years ago that you did with immediately merging like report card data in a way that was like, wait a second, I've been trying to do that for months. And you were just kind of able to drag it, slap it together and do a couple of things, which that's why I haven't messaged you lately, because I'm still holding a grudge because of that. But grateful that you were able to come and spend some time with us. As always, it's good to see you.
Yep.
And hopefully you hang around because you might be able to answer some of these questions. So
Sure.
as part of the last set of surveys and such, we had some responses that really touch on a couple of different topics. One of the topics was, what do we expect, or how have your data needs changed was one of the questions. And the other was October 3rd meeting topics. So I've tried to summarize what the big kind of takeaways were in there. And I know that's not formatted the best, but we can use these as the beginning of some of our user group talk topics, or at least a couple combination starters. Or if you see something that's not on this list and you want to discuss as part of this last bit, this is the opening for any high level questions, detailed questions. And you have enough people here with enough experience who should be able to kind of talk you through some potential challenges you might have, or be able to help you get started at least on the right track. The one thing that I will say that immediately jumped out at me was there was a question there about surveys and survey data. I have been to quite a few Tableau conferences, and every year, one of the highlights of the conference to me was going to one of Steve Wexler's sessions, because Steve Wexler does a really good job with using Tableau and taking survey data especially. And in that survey data, being able to combine it in a bunch of ways. Originally, he was using Excel, worked into using just Tableau Desktop. And recently, he's put a lot of information in on how to use Tableau Prep to prepare survey data. So here's a link to his datarevelations.com, visualizing survey data. I encourage you to go there, click on the link, and subscribe to his newsletter. Because every week he puts a lot of things in there, not just about survey data, but about effective dashboard creation in general. And I also recommend signing up for one of his workshops. I did one in May that was basically on building world-class business dashboards. And it's interesting. It wasn't just a sit and get, because it was over the course of 2 days, about 5 hours each day, which I was able to carve out some time to do this. But it was a really small group. There was only 10 of us. He referred to each individual person. There was some group work, but it was highly interactive. And he gives discounts to education people specifically. So it's pretty inexpensive to be able to deal with someone who is not only a Tableau expert, but a Zen master, and who does this thing day after day, year after year, and is considered one of the best people kind of doing this work. So I encourage you, if survey data is your thing, or you're probably going to be asked to do a lot of surveys if you haven't already, and the rest of us are probably sick of looking at survey data. but you're going to be doing probably more surveys between now and by the time this is all done. So it'd be a good idea to get well versed in the survey stuff. So with that said, our topics are there. If there's anything that anyone wants to talk about or anyone wants to bring up, this is the time to do it. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns?
Of course I do. So I just want to let people know that we at Renton, we're working on greater use of APIs so we can get down into some of these Hello ID, Google Analytics stuff that we'll later produce in Tableau. So if you've been doing that and you have found quick ways to do it, we're happy to have that information. We have access to Google Analytics and that sort of stuff. But we're going to keep digging deeper so we can get that user row level data so we can combine like use of Google Classroom with Canvas, use of Canvas and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of some of the stuff we're working on now. I texted Coleman earlier, we're looking forward to the maps so we can put some maps on maps when those are coming up.
Certainly. I know at last year's conference, there were 2 different sessions on APIs. One of them was on the I think it was REST API, and then the other one was specific to creating web objects in order to feed APIs. And they're both pretty good sessions. Low entry level, meaning not a lot of coding needs to be known in order to start. And they also started with where do you get the GitHub syntax in order to be able to use the Tableau models. So a lot of really good stuff there. I don't know if anyone else is using APIs or digging into that. I know we have been on the edge of investigating, mainly to get a lot of the Office 365 and Microsoft information if we can, but there's a lot of other spaces for API work. Anyone else digging into that or have any information, insights?
I've been working on it, but not super successful yet. Interested in info if you guys get things to work well, but that's something on my task list for the next few weeks.
Yeah, maybe we could put on the next tug since we do the tugs more quarterly. You know, we'll have more, maybe someone has some more traction.
Yeah, and it'd be a good idea if you do run into any resources. I think we do have a resources section in our Teams site that we have together. So place some resources in there if you find anything that's interesting, because again, we all want to get to that next level with the APIs, and I feel like that's the next big thing for us to really dive into, especially when we're blending public data, because there's a lot of public data sources that we can do in order to figure out some regional things that would be extremely useful to us. It's just been a little bit challenging to get that into either a data warehouse or directly into any of our Tableau environments. Anyone else?
I also just want to give a shout out to Alex. Thank you for speaking up and saying, well, I don't use this as much as some other people do. So please, I know many of you are hidden behind your cameras because it's a bad hair day today. Tashawn has a bad hair day. But
yeah. Today is one of them.
Yeah, but we've been sometimes at the high level, and please ask the low level questions too. Even if you think your question's dumb, well, you probably can get an answer. That's kind of another reason to have this user group, is to have a safer space, ask questions that you might have.
Yeah, I want to second that, David, because we have been, I know we've been at this for a while, but one of the reasons that we've been increasing in success with some of the things we're doing is partly because of this group. We've exchanged ideas and been able to spark each other, right? In a lot of ways, to be able to say, oh yeah, we're doing that, or to be able to show something that we're doing. But there's no such thing as a bad question in this environment, because Tableau has a pretty rich stack. And yes, it's easy, right? But it's not simple. And so that's one of the things that we really dig into, is the fact that it's easy because it's easy to relate to some of the concepts, but you need to, kind of practice a little bit, get better at your craft. And then you get to a point to where everything just starts to click, and then it takes off from there. And everyone who's spent any amount of time in Tableau understands that. So if you're at the very beginning of the stage, don't worry about it. There's no such thing as a bad question. And some of that will remind us that we need to simplify some of the things we're doing so that we can have, more effectiveness. So anyone, this is your time. I always wonder if people went to sleep or, especially when you can't see people, right?
I'm
Well,
still awake.
okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
And we go to comment topics, Lou. Any predictions on when it will actually have our first freeze here?
Tomorrow.
Or actually, if Jose is actually on the line as well. Jose, do you want to talk a little bit about what Cassidy's putting together in terms of the K-12 conference?
Yeah, so right now we just finished up Tableau conference. We are putting together a K-12 kind of get together. More details to come on that. But we also have with our with Salesforce acquisition of Tableau, we also have some K-12 stuff coming down the pipe, which is more geared around Salesforce. But we definitely have some conferences coming up. Just stay tuned on that. I'll be able to, once I get more information, I'll be able to relay that back to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll make one more call because I don't want to keep everyone. I know that everyone is busy, even though it's a Friday. Usually Friday is when I get the, oh yeah, we forgot one thing, and that one thing takes 15 hours. So I know that some other people have that same Friday thing that goes on, but if anyone else has anything, seriously, there's no question that's too small for anyone that's on the call. I mean, you have Coleman, Jose. You also have David and Brian contributing. We have, Ashley, Sarah's very gifted at all of this. And Nick, on our team is also gifted in this space. Lizzie, brand new to our team, but has a lot of expertise, insight in data. So lots of people you can ask if you have any questions. So
and then maybe turn off the recording if they don't want there to be recorded. Well,
I know.
Asking a question.
Question is, we have no idea what we're doing with attendance data. Oh my goodness, right? So one last thing before we go, I know that this list is kind of daunting. I mean, because we're all in the same place with dealing with tracking of remote learning. This whole idea of what are the new data sources that we need. I think that one of the things that we can do is try to generate a little bit more information on the team site and some of our collaborative sites, just to say that has anyone thought this, or are you thinking in this space? Because you're not alone. This is also not just our Tableau user group, but this is also our data group, so to speak, because we're all dealing with the same K-12 challenges, right? Like I said, the survey data is something that we all share depending on platform, because I know that the districts that are using Qualtrics are probably saying, oh yeah, that does everything. But when you're trying to blend it with other data sources, not so much, right? And that's usually what we're trying to do, is blend our survey data with something else so that we can make a determination on a direction to go. So we can help with that, right? As a group, this idea of growth and progress monitoring, especially considering we're kind of in this limbo with SBA, some of our, formative assessment data, depending on the maturity of your district, we might not necessarily have that. So how are you doing things like determining engagement, right? Not just activity, but true engagement. A student is actually doing things in this asynchronous or synchronous environment. How are you gauging those things? Those are questions that we can continuously ask each other, because this isn't just a local regional thing. This is national and worldwide. So people are actually trying to solve this in a lot of different ways. And some of our districts have some innovative ways that they've thought about this, or at least the data that they're including. And even if you aren't the right person to ask that question, you probably know who those people are. So a couple of things that you can do is, if people around you are asking questions, you can always submit them to the group, and maybe someone will give you a response that at least points you in the right direction. Because data work is sometimes lonely, singular work in some cases, and you want to dig yourself out of it, you have a group here. So with that said, if no one else has anything else, I'm going to turn it back over to Ashley to close this.
It might be a good closing, Ashley and Sean, if people just want to go around and say one thing that they're working on. So I'll model. So one thing we're working on that we started last year, we're trying to improve this year, is high school graduation dashboard. We're a Skyward district, and the information in Skyward is not always accurate. And one of the things that, for example, that's challenging is finding the kids, providing a dashboard based on high school grades for things like algebra and geometry, which they may have taken in middle school. So that's one of the things that we're trying to keep improving so that we have a dashboard that counselors actually want to use for their, instead of all their different little forms that they create for high school graduation.
And I'll just do a quick shout out and be honest that this is an idea we stole from Nick, who is apparently at Renton now.
So all your questions are answered now, right? Because he's working with you. So
Exactly.
I had a quick question. Just as you were talking earlier, David, and you were talking about some of the different data sources, you mentioned Canvas. Do you all have a hold on Canvas data? Because that's one sticking point that we've had. Like, we've been given access to it, but it's just like a dump of data, and figuring out what to use and how to pull it all together has been cumbersome, to say the least. So just wondering if you've been pulling that or using it and found what works well for you all.
Yeah, you can email me. We can set up a time, or if others also, we do something in Teams or something like that. Yeah, we have a pretty good handle on what Canvas has, and are trying to get it ways to get it through the API so we can get a better display.
I saw that they have an API like coming. Yeah, that's not quite ready yet. So cool.
That's the reason I've been looking into APIs, is because we use Schoology for our LMS, and I built a dashboard based on the export that we can get from them, but it's like requires me to manually export it and upload it every time we want to update. And of course the schools, and of course the schools are like, they're wanting to use Schoology login data as their attendance for the day that they don't have Zoom meetings. And, so it's like, I can't be doing that every day. So I'm trying to figure out how to pull it from the API.
So Coleman, since schools or since education is becoming part of the vertical, it might be a good idea to start to plant the seed of here are some of the connectors that we need, because we have probably like 5 or 6 which would do us really good, and one of them is Canvas, right, and Schoology, because those are the two of the bigger ones that are used especially regionally. And then there's a few other applications that we can probably finagle. If we had a top 5, we could come up with a top 5 that I think would be pretty effective, if that's possible.
You're muted, Coleman.
Yeah, I noticed that. Thank you. Yeah, no, I would agree. I think it's definitely helpful to kind of get an idea of what is needed. Obviously there's the internal aspects of Tableau in terms of the partnerships that we can create with the various education technology companies, essentially, because you're right. It's one thing to have a developer work on essentially building a native connector which leverages the APIs, similar to how Tableau's current Salesforce connector is essentially built off of their APIs. Right. So I definitely agree that there's some work that needs to be done there. But in terms of getting those things prioritized within product management, is certainly something that we need to work on. I think right now, part of it is the Salesforce education cloud is probably one priority of trying to get those objects easier to pull and how they all relate to the Salesforce side. But you're right, getting Canvas data and some of the others, because you're right, every API is different. Every technology solution, their implementation of the API may be straightforward or less straightforward. And then, obviously at the endpoint, you need to get it back into something that Tableau can natively connect to. And so kind of understanding the Hyper API to just pull it directly into essentially a Hyper extract versus loading into a data warehouse and those types of things. But it would certainly be useful to at least understand the key sources and what the challenges are, and see what happens. Because now we have certainly a team within, I guess it would be more like salesforce.org is more of the focus of how we support education, but trying to figure out all the technologies and how to pull them.
Yeah, well, the good news about Canvas is it's P20. So there's enough of a user base to where it'd be beneficial for Tableau as well. So should be a fairly easy sell, right?
Yeah. Does Canvas and I could be wrong about this. Does Canvas have some solutions that pipe the data into Redshift as a solution? Is that just a cost aspect of using their APIs versus using, the ready built applications, that the challenge there? Because I think that's the other potential sticking point, right? Is oftentimes Tableau is going to leverage the technologies of partners and connect with the partner solution more than it is we're going to be able to just have a list of 250 connectors in Tableau desktop, right? There might be some aspects, I don't know how technologies like MuleSoft for API integration and endpoints and different things, and then how Tableau is going to then leverage MuleSoft for those types of data pipelines. There's lots of kind of up in the air things about how all the data integration points, and then certainly for higher education, it's okay. What is the cost to implement a solution? It's certainly something that we're aware of, but trying to keep bubbling it up, make education a first-class citizen in the sense of the way solutions are prioritized in the Tableau development world.
First-class citizen, but only have the funds to ride and coach.
Well,
there you go.
Another thing I thought I might just throw out there that I just thought of with the Schoology data is, with that data, there's so much data that I do have problems with the dashboards loading really slowly. And so I think I'm just going to have to limit the time, the time period that I pull. But if anybody has any ideas on how to make that better, let me know, because it's a static extract, but it's still just a lot of rows.
Is it query performance in terms of the visualization or the time it takes to update the data?
The visualization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
The
to know.
loading, the visualization takes a long time.
Okay. Good to know.
So,
Yeah. In terms of, volume of data, right? Millions, billions, et cetera, rows, and then complexity of the dashboard design as well sometimes can play into it. But yeah, it's good to know.
Would it be possible to pre-aggregate the data in the data field or data source? Would that help? Would that be possible? And if so, do you think that would help?
Yeah, I'd have to rethink my dashboard, but that might work, because that would definitely lower the number of rows if I were to aggregate it.
I mean, for what it's worth, I suggested it, and I've done that, I think, literally once in the 5 years I've been using Tableau. So, I understand when it's like, no, but I don't want to.
I know. Well, it's kind of nice to be able to see, okay, what documents did they look at? What, assignments did they turn in? It's kind of nice to see the details. So I'm not sure how I would aggregate it, but I might be able to, at least for parts of it, just aggregate it ahead of time. That's a good thought.
All right. Anyone else? Not even with the David prompt of what are you doing now? Nothing?
Yeah, we're doing nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. We're listening to you.
I can go. I'll tell you what I'm doing now.
All right. Thank you.
Well, I just this morning added a bunch of dashboards for our admin on failing grades, because I know you guys probably know we have a lot more kids struggling with their grades working remotely. So we've done some more focused stuff with that, and then the LMS data and our ticketing system data, kind of trying to figure out how to make our tech team a little bit more efficient. And then, we want to start looking more at on track type data, but we're trying to build the infrastructure to decide what we want to define as on track and all that kind of stuff first. But that's what we're working on.
Appreciate it, Sarah.
And it's also kind of hard to define on track when we don't have assessment data and we don't, you guys know the struggle.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, y'all. This is Sheila from Renton School District, and I'm currently working on iReady, an iReady dashboard, and it's my first time actually working with the iReady department, basically, because I'm new to Tableau. I'm going to 1 year now, so yeah. So that's what I'm doing, and also doing some digital learning dashboards, like David mentioned before, in regards to Canvas and Google Classroom. So yeah.
So thank you, Sheila, for speaking up. I know that I think Renton, do you guys use iReady, right? Yeah, you use iReady.
As of this year, we do.
Yeah, so this year we do. Yep, and
do.
at Kent we use iReady, and I think that Sarah, your district uses iReady as well.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have probably between the three of us, we have some examples of how to grab the data, massage the data as needed, and then how to display it in a bunch of different ways. I think so. We can give you some examples if you want.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I don't know if you've have you connected to our we have you connected in our team site. If not, we'll send you information for that.
Okay.
And make sure that you can connect. And then in that site, we can give you some opportunities just to, do some screenshots, obviously with some blurred, information to give you some at least an overview of this is, some ways to represent, and then you can ask questions and we can kind of do some workshopping in there just to help you along, point you in some directions.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sounds good.
All right. So yeah, if you can, I think we have, since you're on this call, that means that we have your email address, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yep. And so we should be able to reach out and get you added. So I'll talk to Ashley about that a little bit later.
All right. Thank you.
You are in there. I can
yeah.
I can send the general link and put it in the chat for everybody too, just so I believe everybody that's on this call is part of it, but I will go back and double check too after the meeting's over.
Yep. And what Laura put in the chat is that Auburn uses iReady also. So this would be a good opportunity for us to kind of, share and show and talk about what we're doing, right? Because there's a lot of different data that's available in iReady, everything from growth. And so a lot of people rely on their, the iReady dashboards at the teacher level. But we're also trying to do some things where we aggregate so you can see a whole school and do that a little bit better. So I'm sure that we're all in that space. So there's tons of help that can come your way. So see, that's the benefit of speaking up. Right?
Yeah.
So thank you, Sheila. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? See, we're giving away free resources. We're talking about helping you work on your dashboards, all that stuff. Anyone else need that?
I can mention in Auburn, again, for me specifically, it's in the special ed department that I'm working. So one thing I did last year was I made a dashboard that just shows caseload counts for teachers in our department and who might be approaching overload, how many students are in each class, that kind of thing. And we use that for planning class sizes for the following year and program moves. The problem is that it continues now to be a dashboard that requires me to manually run reports in Skyward and IEP Online. And that works, but one of my dreams is to have a little more automation. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a possible way to use automated reporting in Skyward that somehow sends a file to some location that I can have a live connection to my Tableau visualization. Haven't figured that out yet, but kind of my ambition is to somehow get some kind of automated report out of Skyward.
If you want to reach out to us, we don't have exactly the most sophisticated of systems in Renton, but what we do have is, we have something like a few dozen scheduled reports that run every night, sometime between 11 and 2, and then we have a script that pulls them from Skyward down to our file explorer that Tableau has access to, and then we just refresh our extracts daily. So it's not the most elegant system by any stretch of the imagination, but it does keep our data up to date as of last night. And sounds like if you're talking about things like caseloads and stuff, that's not going to be changing by the minute. A daily report like that would probably be sufficient. So if you want to reach out to us, I'd be happy to go over that kind of stuff with you.
Awesome. Yeah, that definitely sounds better than only when I log in and manually pull the report. So
yes, it's definitely better than the manual pull.
Yeah, and a lot of those solutions come from the fact that people here have felt that pain of having to upload something every day and refresh something every day. So you figure out ways to do it. And I think one of the things that we learned early on is that in lieu of being able to purchase better tools to do this, it doesn't matter if it's ugly in the background, as long as it works. You stop caring about that until you can get this. As long as it works and it's accurate, you stop caring about the fact that, it's a Rube Goldberg machine in the background. But, it grabs the right files, puts them in the right place, and then Tableau knows how to use them. So, yeah, I think we each have solutions that are just like that.
Yeah.
My other obstacle
Alex,
to making
Alex, the IEP online, you still have to download manually. It's
They're a pain.
not my favorite. Not my favorite.
Yeah, they're selling a new data cube product that I think is supposed to help with that, but we haven't paid for it. And needless to say, I'm trying to find ways to get this data for free without paying a whole bunch of extra money.
Yeah.
Well, it's your data, so you shouldn't have to pay for it.
Right?
I tried working with them last year to try to get automated reports or database access, and they were not having any of it.
Yeah, it's an add-on product, so they don't really have any motivation to help outside of that.
But one of the workarounds we ended up doing is we put caseload information in as a generic class that we didn't specify like what the IEPs were or anything like that. We just associated them with case managers so that we could, know which SLPs had which kids and that kind of thing. That was one of the workarounds we've done. But
my other obstacle to getting this to work is that a lot of my dashboards are reliant on data that had gone through prep, and I don't think I can automate prep flows unless we upgrade to Conductor or whatever it's called. So I'll have to stop doing that and just use Tableau Desktop directly, I guess.
See,
Yeah,
Jose must.
I find. Sorry,
Jose must have known. No, yeah, Jose must have known that question was coming because he jumped off right before you asked it. Because this has been like every time this question comes up, it's a pain point for all of us because we usually bring up the fact that it's cost prohibitive for us to do this, and it seems like it shouldn't be so expensive to be able to do that. We should at least have a workaround somewhere. And if we want to purchase the product, then fine, to make it easier. But yeah, that whole prep to server thing costs enough money to where I'm like, all right, well, I can just hire a person that does just that or something, So
yeah, my job title is not high enough to approve huge increases in spending. So I'm just trying to maximize what I can get done with what we already have.
That is truth.
Yeah, like
Even a bill for Jose, poor guy. He's only been here 4 months.
That's why the last time.
I'm staying silent. I didn't hear a quoting question. I just heard something was expensive.
Tableau prep.
It's good for learning, but it's good to do stuff in desktop because then you can automate it and then you just use prep for one-off requests.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have a couple things where I had a reminder last year. I had like a task on my thing that was repeating every Friday where I just ran the Tableau prep workflow. But I think I'm going to switch it to an R script this year because I don't have to do that, but we'll see.
The other thing I was just thinking of that Coleman keeps and Tableau keeps reminding me of that is this whole subscription. So you can get a snapshot in time. So it's like, oh, we have a lot of people said, what did it look like a year ago? I was like, you got to take a picture. It's the data updates. So that subscription will help people rewind like, oh, I want this picture every month. And I can then analyze what the difference is from one month to the other.
Definitely.
Yeah, we added the ability to attach a PDF to subscription, so that way you could save a physical copy of something, put it on a folder, so you're not searching back through your email trying to find the image at that date that the subscription ran.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, and then I haven't explored it at all. I know that there's a concept of refreshing Tableau prep flows from the command line. So if you're kind of used to scripting things, that might be something that you can look at in lieu of the prep conductor tool. So you might look into that. There is, I haven't looked into it, but the first note says if you use single sign-on for authentication, running flows command line isn't available. So you might have to look at, the things that, are the different components that allow you to do various things, but that could be an option or just something worth exploring. It's just Tableau Prep Command Line, which was what we had available before we released Tableau Prep Conductor, because before Conductor, it was even more when there was no automation at all, versus having Command Line now an actual tool that does it, but figuring out what fits your needs and the budget and that type of thing.
Wait, is that part of the add-on, or is that not?
No, I don't believe you're using the add-on, because essentially you're just basically using our local instance of Tableau Prep Builder to run it locally, and then there's whether you got to tie it to the REST API or something that then will publish up the output back up to Tableau server. But yes, from what I can see, and it's something that I haven't looked at since Tableau Prep Conductor came out, but since I know we're talking about finding ways to get things done without the cost of a I'll send you the command line info in the chat, and people can look at it and see if it works. It's not something I've tested, but there's documentation on the Tableau Prep command line.
Thank you for that. When our dev environment blows up, we will make sure we reach out to you. Thank you for Coleman. Anyone else? And thank you, Alex, for speaking up. We appreciate that. Hopefully, we can help you find what you need. Because again, most of the things that you run into, especially for the first 2 or 3 years, a lot of people on this call have walked through and kind of dealt with some of those things. So use this group as a resource to ask questions to. And I'm pretty sure that there's someone here that can answer most of the questions, because we have varying levels of expertise. Some of us have been using Tableau since version like 5 something, 6 something. And so and for a lot of years, I think my first was like 2012 or something like that. So we have a lot of experience and have dug into it a lot of different ways and use it a lot of different ways. So someone here can help you if you have questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Ashley again.
Yeah, I was wondering what my team's working on, since they're both on here and they didn't say anything. So I was wondering if that means they might need more do or something. I didn't really know. So
David agrees.
I think we're working on some cool stuff. So if I'll just speak briefly to it. We've been doing some work on engagement and trying to answer that question and kind of define it as we're building things. So we've been looking at our attendance data just as a baseline of, kind of like you can't be engaged if you're not attending, that kind of logic. And then we are a heavy Microsoft district, so we use Microsoft Teams and those applications. So we've been able to pull some data about time in calls in Microsoft Teams, and have been able to, we're trying to work on the Canvas piece and get that in there too. And we had one survey question recently when we were asking about some hybrid readiness. We asked about remote learning and had students and families self-report the level of engagement of their students. So it's only one data point, but it's another piece to be able to tie into the story. So that's one of the things we're working on. And throughout the year, we're kind of changing our dashboard design and building more narrative into our dashboard and more research narrative. So saying this is why we're looking at this, because research shows that if you miss this many days, you have this decreased chance of graduating or something like that, for example. and having some narrative and overview that leads into our dashboards. So it's been different, and we've been looking through a lot of different examples on Tableau Public to see how different users incorporate narrative into their dashboards, and trying to strike that balance between still being quick and being able to get some of those metrics in there, but also getting some explanation in there and really getting at the why. So that's the big work that we've been doing right now, and I'm excited about how it's turning out. We're starting to get some drafts out and some beta versions and getting some feedback. So that has been good. So if anybody is interested in that or has done some similar things, let us know. And with that, just want to thank you all for attending today, sharing your ideas and listening. I will be sending out another survey for, I think, probably another 3 months out or something when we meet again. Who knows what'll be happening then, right? So we'll do similar surveys in the past, looking for times and topics and all of that. And I know we talked about a few things today, so I'll capture those. But otherwise, if there's nothing else, have a great weekend, a great rest of your Friday, and we'll talk again soon, whether it's on Teams or on another one of these. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good
Thanks,
rest of your
everyone.
Yeah, and I'll try to convene an iReady team with Shoreline, ourselves, Auburn, and Kent.
Perfect.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you.